This is Gemara Moed Katan Daf Chav Beis. Today's shir has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, one who has seen incredible Yeshuas from the schos of the Koyach of Torah, and we're hoping in Mirz Hashem that the learning of the entire Chabura should be a tremendous schos for Shlema, for Rechama Yiska Miriam Bas Tzirel Bracha, a young woman who needs an incredible Yeshua and incredible Refuah Shlema. In Mirz Hashem, we should all learn in the schos of tremendous Refuah Shlema Bekarayv, for Rechama Yiska Miriam Bas Tzirel Bracha, the schos of Torah, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the schos of learning Torah Berabim should bring an incredible refuah shlema bekarev, as well as learning should be a schos shidduch so chaim devar chaim and devar shemim basi it's a good shalom and malko lord chaim zav shenta zikut bas shenda shimon ben chaya ofik ben teli sham ben levi zav rochav dina, as well as the schos refuah shlema shel yosef ben hen yefei the man megal chaim and sar shalom si ben rezel ezo sar bas kanan deli tabasim bas chay so yosef mendel eliezer parat ben zalei shalom bas nami bas figo shel khanash mo ben tilo don khan rezel malko chaya bas min adin en mashim mendes figo rivka bas shem zozim lester Sarbas Kila, Shomei Sarah Ben Asi Yehud Israel Avram Rachla Dei Shimshon Ben Chana Abigail Perel Bas Esther Miriam Gabriel Bas Flumi Yisrael Yitzchak Ben Dina B'Soich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We pick it up in the bottom of Chav Aleph Amid Beis, the last narrow line. Tanu Rabbanon says the Gemara Avol Gimel Yamim Arishainim, and Avol during the first 3 days after the death. Bamimakom Karoiv Moina Imayim. What is the case over here? Someone shows up. Unfortunately, Rahman al-Islan, he doesn't know that a relative was nifter. And he shows up while all the rest of his family is sitting Shiva. If he comes within the first 3 days of Shiva, what's the halacha? Moina imahen, he counts with them, meaning they're going to finish Shiva in 4 days, he will as well. If he comes from a far place, which we'll see what exactly that means, then what is the halacha if he comes from a far place? 1 second, just looking for a Rashi for a moment. Okay, we'll see the Ba Makam Rachik means if it's more than a day's travel, Moina La'atzmo, he counts for himself, and he has to do his own 7 days. Mikan ve'ilach, afilu ma b'makam karayv, Moina li'atzmai. From then and onward, if he arrives after the first day of Shiva, then regardless where he comes from, he has his own 7 days. So again, we're discussing a unique case, similar to yesterday, to the discussions we've been having of a Shmuah Krayv, a hearing about Avelos, etc. Now we have a case that someone doesn't know, and he shows up and he sees his entire family sitting in mourning. What does he do? He sits with them, of course. But for how long, says the Gemara, if you show up within the first 3 days from a close place, then what do you have to do? Then you count with them. More than that, you're going to count on your own. Rabbi Shimon Omer says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, says Rav Shimon, and we'll see that this is going to be how we're going to hold, that even if you come on the 7th day, what's the halacha? You count with them. Everyone sits Shiva in unison at one time. Omar Mar, let's delve a bit deeper into this brisa. 2 lines from the bottom of Chaval V'Mebeis. Gimel Yamim Arishayim Babi Makom Karayv, as we said. Mani Ma'im Amar Chibar Abam Yechram V'Hu Shish Gadol Abayis Bibayis. What's the case? The case is that the Gadol Abayis, the senior member of the household, he is already sitting Shiva. Then one of the younger members of the family shows up, then he counts with them. But let's say the senior member, the oldest brother, etc., shows up, then everything goes by him, and then he starts a new Shiva on his own. So what basically happens, based on what we just said, is that if the oldest brother, etc., shows up, then he starts counting his own Shiva. So I ask the Gemara, Yibayilu, as we turn over to today's Daf Chav Beis Amid Aleph, Halak Gadol Abayis LeBeis HaKvaros. What happens if the Gadol Abayis, the oldest member of the household, went to the cemetery, goes to Beis HaKvaros, and he leaves everyone else at home? When does Shiva begin? Ma'u, what is the halach? And as everyone realizes, this is going to segue directly into a very, very relevant sugya. How do we deal with if some people stay in America, if some people fly to Eretz Yisrael? We're about to see the Makar here today. So says the Gemara, what if the senior member goes to the Kvura, and as Rashi points out, he stays there for 3 days? What does everyone else do? Are they allowed to start Shiva without him or not? Says the Gemara, Ta'ashemad, Amar Rav Chibar Rava, Amar Rav Yechon, Afilu Al Kodol Abayis Ve'is HaKvaros, Moina Imahem, he counts with them. Says the Gemara, Moina Imahem, what? What does that mean? Tanya Moina La'atzmai. We said he's the Kodol Abayis, he's the oldest member. He counts on his own. Answers the Gemara, like Kasha Asa Begoit Lasa, Delay Asa Begoit Lasa. When do we say that he counts with the other people sitting in Shiva? Even though he is the oldest member, they can start sitting Shiva while he's at the cemetery is when he comes back within 3 days. If he comes back outside of 3 days, then he counts on his own. And says the Gemara, Rav told to the people of Salfuni, if you come within 3 days, you count with them, then you have to count to yourself. And that is at the Psak Halacha. With regard to this Gadol Abayis, with regard to the senior member, when he shows up, how he counts Shiva with everyone else. Says the Gemara, concluding this section, Amru Rav l'menei mechuzah. Aton, you you do not go after the aron. You don't go with the coffin to the Beis Hakvaros for the burial. And here's the critical line: when you turn away your face from the gate of the city, you begin to count Shiva. And this is the makar that in an event that, let's say, there's a few members of a family, and 3 of them fly to Eretz Yisrael for the Kavura, and 3 of them stay in New York. The 3 of them that stay in New York, as soon as they leave the mace, they leave the nifter, they leave the airport, the plane takes off, those 3 people begin to sit Shiva right then, and what often will now happen is they will get up from Shiva a day earlier, because they're going to start right then and there, whereas those in Eretz Yisrael are not going to go till after the flight, after the Kavura, which of course is often the next day. Says the Gemara about 10 lines down, Chavpezam and Aleph, continuing that Rav Shimon Aimer was the opinion of Rav Shimon, even if you come the 7th day, you count with them. Omar Rav Chia bar Gamdam, Rav Yisi ben Shalom, Rabbi Vushaba, Umatzah Menachem Etzli. You said you come on the 7th day, and we already learned, Mixes Hayom, Kikulo Yandi number 7, Yidam Chakras, you get up and Shiva's over. So says the Gemara, when you come on day 7, it's only if they're still sitting. If you find them during Chakras, right after davening, sitting on the ground. But if you come and they already got up from Avelos, then it's too late. You have to have your own Shiva. And now, Bayi Ravanan, an interesting question. In Arulam of Layamdu Mahu, you open the door, you catch them at the last moment. You see they're about to stand up. They're on the wave standing up. Is that called they got up from Shiva or not? Says the Marateku. That is a question for Eliyahu Hanavi. Continues the Gemara. Gemiri Chavrei Gemiri Chavrei. The friends of Rav Abba learned the following Messiah from Rav Abba. Manu, who is that? Rav Zira, Rav Zira. Some say it was the friends of Rav Zira, Rav Zira. Manu, who is that? Rav Abba, Rav Chia, Bar Abba, Rav Yichlan. That what? Halacha, Rav Shimon Gamliel, Betrefus, Halacha, Rav Shimon Ba'avel. Rav Shimon Ba'avel is Hadamar. That's the halacha that we just said. What's this Shimon Ba'avel? What's this Rav Shimon Ba'avel? Excuse me. This is the halacha that we just said, that even if you come on day number 7, what is the halacha? The halacha is, if you come on day number 7, you count with them as long as they are still sitting. And we baskin like Rav Shimon Gamliel with regard to something of Shreifus. What is that din? Says the Gemara on the first Y line. Rav Shimon Gamliel Betrefus. What is the halacha? That's nan. A Gemara in Chulin B'nei Me'ayin Shnikvu V'leicha Seismasin Kesheira. If you have a case of an intestine, and the intestine has a hole in it, but there's the leicha, there's the mucus that is sealing up that hole. And now, what is the halacha? Ksheira, it does not have a din of a treifa. The animal is a kosher animal. Divrei Rashbag, that's what Rav Shimon Gamliel holds. Says the Gemara, my lecha, what is this lecha? What is this liquid, this mucus that is filling up this puncture inside the intestine that's allowing the animal to be kosher? Rav Kana Sirka Te'emaya Denafik Agav Tochka. This is referring to this some sticky liquid from the intestines that when you push the intestines, it comes out. That is clogging up the hole. That's enough to consider the animal a viable animal, and it is a kshera. And now, based off of this, Amar Mandu, says someone, we don't know his name, Rashi says, Mandu, someone who's in yeshiva said the following, I would go up there to Israel and I would learn the Torah of the Rebbe from the Mari, the master, and then I said, I wish I would go. And then he went to Eretz Yisrael and he found the Rav Abba, Rav Chibar Hava. And he said, do we paskin this way? Ein halacha amri. So we answered, no. I said halacha ein halacha. We do not paskin like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon Ba'avel mai, but do we pass like Rav Shimon Ba'avel? Amrle plucked in inu. That is a machlokes. The itmar Rav Chisda halacha v'chein Rav Yichon halacha, but Rav Nachman amar ein halacha. The ein halacha Rav Shimon Gamliel betrefus. Excuse me, Rav Nachman Amar, ein halacha. So that is the machlokes whether we indeed paskin. We just learned that we do not paskin like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Whether we paskin like Rav Shimon is a point of debate. What's the halacha? Says the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom. Ve'ein halacha kirashbag b'treifus. We do not paskin like Rav Shimon Gamliel again with the puncture in the intestines that's being filled up with the sticky liquid from the intestines that comes out from the pressure, deeming the animal of nata, treifa, and kasher. We do not paskin that way. But we do paskin like Rav Shimon Ba'avel. Why? I think this is time number 4. We've seen this Yisayid or more. We go with the lenient opinion with regard to Avelus. And that is the B'zak Halacha. So if someone shows up on day number 7, finds his entire family sitting Shiva, as long as they're still sitting, you sit with them for that moment and then there's no more Shiva. If they're standing up, then not. If they're on the middle, we wait for Eliyahu Navi to answer that question. Says the Gemara, now we're going to get into all the different distinctions between the burial, the Chomer, the very stringent and strict halachas of burying a father, a mother, Rachmana litzlan, versus all the other relatives. Says the Gemara, Kol HaMesim Kulin, and all the different deceased, referring to anyone aside for a father or mother, the rest of the Shiva Karmin, brother, sister, etc. Madcha mitasai harezem meshubach. If the quicker you get to the Kvura, that's wonderful. Alaviv alimai harezem meguna. But if you do it for your father or mother, that's meguna. That's not so nice. It seems that you just want to get it over with, but you have to say a spadim. You want to give the proper covet to parent. But says the Gemara 2 lines from the bottom. Erev Shabbos or Erev Yantif, then Harezem Mishavach, you got to finish up before Shabbos and Yantif. Then it's always praiseworthy, even for a parent. You know, so din number 1 is father and mother should not rush it, give them the proper espedim. Akola Mesim Kulin, all the other dead. If you want to decrease your business, you don't want to go to work, that's a wonderful thing, but you don't have to. But on father and mother, as we turn over to Chav Beis Amid Beis, you have to decrease your business. You want to take off your tefillin or not? It's up to you. You have to take off your, does not mean take off your tefillin, Rashi says what's chaylis means kseifa, your shoulder, and this is referring to a type of kriya that they used to do, that part of the shoulder would be exposed. There's a story with one particular Gadol Adar, Shemei's Aviv, that his father was nifter, bigish lachlites, and he wanted to do this practice of chalitza, which is to rip the clothing to show the shoulder, a form of showing sympathy. Bigish Gadol Adar acher, and a different Gadol Adar wanted Sheimai lachlites to as well do the same thing, to show that he's with him. So one person lost his father, so he wants to show his shoulder. The other Gadol Adar wants to commiserate with him. But the first one stopped and did not do what he wanted to do, did not bear his shoulder, did not rip his clothing. Why? Because he didn't want the other Gadol Adar to do the same. And for the other Gadol Adar to have done it, it would not be proper coverage to the first Gadol Adar, even though it was his father, he did not do such a practice. But says the Gemara, 1 second. Rabbiya. Gadol Adar, when the Brisa said it was a Gadol Adar, that was Rebbe. That was referring to Rebbe. Gadol Adar Shema, who is the other Gadol Adar? That was who? Rebbe Baracha. That's one way of learning it. Vigad Yarmi, some say Fakir. Gadol Adar was who? Rebbe Barach. Of Gadol Adar Shema, it was Rebbe. Now, after we figured out who these two people are, Rebbe and Rebbe Bar Yaakov, the two people of the story, again, the Gadol Adar's father was nifter and he was about to bear his shoulder. The other one said, I'll do the same. So the first one said, I'm not going to do it, so you don't have to do it. Says the Gemara, 1 second. That it was Rebbe Bar Yaakov and the Gadol Adar that was with him was Rebbe. Now it makes a lot of sense that the second one, the Gadol Adar She'imai, was Rebbe, refrained. That's the reason why the first one, Rebbe, who was greater, refrained. Yaakov Bar Acha, he was the Gadol Adar She'imai. So his original Gadol Adar was Rebbe. Why did he not bear his shoulder? Why did he not rip his clothing? In order that his friends should not do the same, the other Gadol Adar. What's the problem? Rav Shimon Gamliel Nasi Have. Who was Rebbe's father? Says the Gemara Gishmak, if you know all the lineage over here. If Rebbe was the original Gadol Hadar, his father was Rashbag. Who was Rashi ben Gamliel? He was the Nasi, and therefore what? Allah is everyone has to tear Kriya and bear their shoulder for the Nasi. So now the story makes no sense. If we're dealing with Rebbe, his father Shimon Gamliel, then everyone has to tear Kriya. So Rebbe would purposely not do this practice of bearing his shoulder in order that his friend Rav Bar Yaakov didn't do the same, but he had to, because we're dealing with Shimon Gamliel, who was the Nasi. Says the Gemara, Kasha. You're right. That is quite the question. Continues the Brisa. You're allowed to take a haircut after 30 days. You're now taking a haircut until your friends yell you, till your friends tell you it's too much, your hair is getting out of control. And here we're going to see that the din of Shana is a din specifically by father and mother, not by other avilim. After 30 days, you're allowed to go to a simcha. You have to wait a year. And what are we referring to over here? Referring to a stam simcha mereyos, a friendship celebration, but we're not discussing anything more than that. As you look at Rashi in the first narrow line says, Sudash Aisin Reyim Vahuvim Zemze. Veloya Simcha Kol Kach. Avul Suda di Simcha Kigon Dinesuin Loy. If you're talking about a real Simcha of a Chasana, then even on the other relatives after 30 days, you're not allowed to participate in that. But Meisvei asked the Gemara and Rabbi Rachana, Simcha Ulemereyos Lamed Yom. The Brisa says it's two different things. One is the Simcha, one is for Mereyos. So what do we see? We see that there's two entities, and yet it says you only have to wait 30 days. So clearly after 30 days, what is allowed? Both a regular simcha and a chasana. Says the Gemara again, Kasha, that is indeed a question. Says the Gemara, another way of learning Rabbi Rachana, Amir Masni Hachi learned as follows. Amar Rabbi Rachana l'simchus mereyos, mutter likanis alter. For a stam simcha, friends getting together to have a little bit of a party, that's allowed right away. I asked the Gemara of Atani, it says in a Brayis you have to wait 30 days. The answer is the Gemara like Kasha, ha ba'arisusa, ha b'paranusa. When we said that you have to wait and you cannot attend the Simcha Mereyos until 30 days, that's the first time they're making a party. Oh, B'Baranusa, that's a reciprocal party. As Rashi points out over here, the one makes a party and all the other one comes and party together with him. But then they throw a party, the back-to-back party, that's a higher level, you cannot participate in. Alva Parnusa, Rashi says, why? It's a lower level. Because you have to go. When you go to one, you have to go to the other one. The reciprocal party, you can't just not show up. Says the Gemara, as we continue the differences between the Shar Mesim and a father and mother, Rachmana Litzlan, that was Niftar. Kula Mesim, Kulan, we're about 25 lines down. First one line is Kulan, and all Mesim, Kriya, Tefach, you tear Kriya, one Tefach. Allah, Alima, Yeshegal, Esliba, you don't just tear one Krefach, tear all the way down to reveal your heart. Amar Rav Avua Maikra, where we see this in the pasuk. He grabbed his garments and he ripped them. And that's what we see for Shar Krayvim. You tear a tefach. When you're talking about other relative, a brother, sister, child, etc., you only tear the topmost garment. Allah Valima Kairis Kulin, you got to tear all the layers, the jacket, the shirt, the undershirt, everything, until you get to be revealing the heart. Vafrakasusa Einoi Me'akeves, but you don't have to rip the Afrakazusa. Rashi says is some sort of head wrap, some sort of kerchief. Echad ish, echad isha, both men and women. A woman rips the bottom garment, and then she turns around. She rips her t-shirt. She turns it around because then it wouldn't be sneeze to reveal her body. And then she rips her top garment, the sweater that she's wearing on top. Then she rips the top one. So again, she's ripping the top one that's visible. The bottom one, you're not going to see that tear because we're going to flip it around for tznius purposes. Kulan says the Gemara, for all other mesim, if you want to actually separate it, you slit a little bit the tefach on top. You want to go further down, you could. You don't want to go further down, you don't have to. You have to separate all the way down again to reveal the heart. And again, I keep on pointing to the left side. Might be hard to see in the video because that's where your heart is, as we'll see in a moment. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda called Kriya she'enei mavdil Al Kamei Safa Shaloi Einai Ella Kara Shel Tiflis. Review disagrees. Review says if you're just going to tear a little bit, that's pointless. You got to tear and reveal. That's the whole point of the tearing. Amar Avavua, my time to have you where to get this from the Chsiv. Vayechazik berbigda vayikarim lishnayim. So what do we learn out from this pasuk? Karaim. Vayikarim. Lishnayim karaim, and he ripped it into two pieces. Mimash v'shnemer vayikar aim, and yodeh shein lishnayim. The karim is plural, so we know it's two. So why do I have to say vayikarim lishnayim l'shenirim karuyim kishnayim, that it should look like two, meaning you should separate it, not just at the neck, but all the way down, so it looks like two different entities. Continues the Raisa, 4 lines from the white lines. Akola meisim kulan sheila lachar shiva. All the other masons after shiva, what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to put you're allowed to do a loose stitch or pin together the garment that you ripped. Umachal la'achar shleishim, and after shleishim you let it properly sew it together. Alav alima shayla la'achar lamid, you're allowed to do some patchwork, a little stitch, a little pin after lamid. Ve'ino machal oilam, you're not allowed to sew it up properly forever. Va'isha shalas al-alter, says Gemara, when it comes to a woman, again in the regards to sneas, right away we pin it up so that she's not revealed at all. Why? Mimnei kvaida, for her honor. On the last narrow line, Kasa Rav Amar by all the mason, you let it tear with your hand or with a knife. You could do with your hand. Generally, the minhag is they start it a little bit with a knife. The Mefarshim speak out because it's pretty difficult to rip our clothing without the knife, and then you tear it across with your hands. They tear it on the inside, meaning they're wearing a coat and they tear underneath it, or it means you tear inside that people don't see it. But father, mother, you tear outside, or it means not with a coat showing in order to everyone sees what you're doing. And the same thing applies to a nasi. You got to rip your clothing on the outside. That they're only similar to the father and mother. We think this is referring to a nasi with regard to ichoy, that you're not allowed to sew it up. So we see that only with regard to sewing it up, the nasi is like father and mother. But seemingly the nasi does not have to tear kriya. Explains the Gemara, nasi is not referring to nasi, referring to everyone else. And we conclude today's share with a story in Nesiya Shachiv. There was a nasi that was nifter. Amalei Rav Chizda Rav Chanan bar Rava kapi asita v'kom Allah. Turn over the brick and stand up on it, and v'kom alei and v'achlei kriya la'alma, and show everyone that you're tearing kriya. What do we see when you tear kriya? You do b'bachutz. Everyone should see. The order for the covenant of the nasi. We'll pick it up from in the Chacham in the next year in Mirza Hashem.